Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Patrick Brown. I'll be joined on this episode by Ryan Callahan. It is Monday of Arkansas week, Monday evening, late afternoon, before the Vols host the Razorbacks, the Hogs, whatever you want to call them. They are coming into Neyland Stadium with a much-changed coaching staff after firing Sam Pittman. Bobby Petrino will be the interim coach, and that is throwing a wrench into Tennessee's preparations for this game this week coming out of an open date. Before we get into discussion, we will touch on some news and notes that we learned from Monday's time on campus, listening to Josh Heupel and some players. And then later in the podcast, we will get to sort of a bigger picture conversation about how do we feel about the rest of the season going from Tennessee. The open dates always give us a chance to see more football as well. And although half the SEC was also off, we got to see a couple of Tennessee opponents square off. And some others in action as well. So, but first of all, Ryan, how are you doing this week? How did you enjoy your open date? And was the Tennessee Titans winning a football game the highlight of your Tennessee open date?
Man, it probably would have to be. I was going to say I got to watch plenty of football, but I also underestimated the impact of having the kids around, because that greatly diminishes your ability to watch football on anything other than your phone when they're wanting to play video games and watch TV shows and stuff like that. So, but yeah, anyway, we made do. We got to watch plenty of SEC games, and yes, ended on a high note there with the first of Cam Ward's 150 plus wins with the Titans. No, probably not, but that was at least a fun game. And just like they drew it up with an interception followed by a fumble into the end zone, just as we all would have predicted.
Yeah, and it was going to be 28-6 until the guy fumbled crossing the goal line, which I mean, you should probably lose if you do that anyway. You should just automatic loss.
The Cardinals are low key among the best franchises in pro sports at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. They are very good at that historically.
And you're talking about the Arizona Cardinals, right? Not your beloved St. Louis Cardinals?
Oh, no, the Arizona Cardinals, not the irrelevant Cardinals with a mid-market budget and a farm system that's not producing players fast enough for them to win more than 78 games. No, not that team.
Well, at my house, we had I was solo dadding this weekend, but I was not about to not watch football. So I had the YouTube multi-view of the whole Saturday. My kids can just deal with it, but they seem to like it though. They're 4; they're still figuring it out. One of my kids is whatever the blue team is, that's who he's rooting for. So,
okay.
We had a couple. I don't know if we had any blue teams playing other blue teams, but we're still in the learning phase. But Tennessee was playing a red team.
He was pulling for Florida, you're saying?
Well, they do like alligators, but I've obviously taught them not to like Florida and not to like Alabama. So, and I think my wife handled the not liking Georgia. So we're working on it. They're so impressionable, so you got to start early. But Tennessee will be playing a red team this week. They will be playing the Pigs, as my kids would probably call them if they saw the logos and the mascots. And we'll see who Tennessee gets back. This has kind of been for a few weeks now, looking at this game coming out of the open date as, hey, Tennessee might be getting most of its guys back. Sounds like they're going to get Daevin Hobbs back, maybe a little less so on Jermod McCoy, the all-SEC cornerback, still working his way back from his ACL injury. Josh Heupel didn't make it sound like it was the McCoy was going to be back this week, saying he still had some more things to do. And listening to Caleb Beasley too, sometimes these players have inadvertently sort of given off hints, but Caleb Beasley was asked about Jermod McCoy on Monday and said, yeah, he's working really hard in the weight room, film room, all these other places other than the practice field where, as we've said on the checkerboard, Ryan, he has to, he's got to practice before he can play. He can't just show up on Friday or show up on Saturday and play. So are we dismissing? It sounds pretty doubtful that McCoy is going to be back this week. I guess Josh Heupel referenced some reporting that suggested, I think, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but that maybe Arkansas was the game he was kind of looking at to coming back. And Heupel seemed to take sort of, I don't want to say issue with it, but saying that it was not taking everything into account what's going on with McCoy. But what do we make of all this, and what do you think the chances are that we see McCoy in uniform and playing on Saturday afternoon?
I think not good at all. I would say it's pretty doubtful that Jermod McCoy is back for this game. It would take a pretty significant change here over the next few days for that to change. So that obviously means the best case scenario is that he would be back for the Alabama game. And I just think it's a completely up in the air situation. I know fans sort of want a timeline on this. I think this is a complicated situation. And I think some of it you can just look at mock drafts that, at CBS Sports, Blake Brockermeyer had a mock draft last week that had McCoy as the number 32 overall pick in the draft, obviously last pick of the first round, but still had him going in the first round. and he hasn't played a snap of football this year. So I think that's always a complicated thing. You're coming off ACL surgery. How many guys have we seen before, Patrick, where they come off of an injury like that and we say they're not the same player until year two? So there's some complicated thought processes that go into that, even if/when he's cleared to return. So I don't think there's any guarantee that this is going to play out by a set timeline or anything like that. I think it's a completely up in the air situation. He could be back, next week. He could be back in a few weeks. He could be back not at all. I think anything is on the table at this point. And in the meantime, that's frustrating for Tennessee, frustrating for fans, but sometimes these situations crop up like that. And the timing of his injury obviously was not ideal, regardless of how this played out. Getting hurt in early January in offseason training, that was going to be complicated for him to come back. I kind of said all along, I thought early October was kind of the earliest he could possibly be back, because we're now 9 months out from that injury, and that's usually a kind of a baseline timeline for when guys could potentially be ready. And with that being said, we saw him out there on the practice field and pretty early in August. It was August 8th that he was out on the practice field and looked, pretty good at that time, going through some drills. So I think at a certain point, it comes down to just how badly does he want to be out there, and how much is he willing to sort of force the issue to get out on the field. And I think that's a more complicated decision or thought process than fans might think. It's I think the competitor in him wants to be out there. I think the pragmatic side knows there's a lot on the line and a lot to think about when you weigh the risk and reward of playing this week, playing in a few weeks, whatever the situation might be. So I don't think it's a cut and dry situation, and I don't think it's quite as simple as, when he's ready, he will play. I think there's, there are multiple facets involved in that, but one of them obviously is, when he feels confident in that knee and ready to get back out there.
Yeah, I think first of all, only he can know when he's ready to go. And so I don't think anyone should assume that, that it's his NFL situation that's making him come back or not come back, right? I mean, only he can know, and he's got to be, like I'm you said, he's got to trust his knee first and foremost. So I don't think anybody should assume that like he's cleared and it's just like he's not playing. He may not play this week because he doesn't want that. I don't think that's the situation. But we'd be ignoring the elephant in the room, Ryan, if we didn't consider like his NFL draft situation was always going to be a part of this process, because he played so well last season. And like you said, there are risks that if he comes back and doesn't play so well and then goes to the draft, he could be costing himself money. And the chances that he could be a first round pick, are they higher if he plays, or are they higher if he doesn't play? I mean, those are factors that he's obviously having to weigh as he goes through the final stages of this process.
Yeah, and I just say that just to point out that it is a multifaceted decision. Right. I don't think it's a simple green light, he's playing, red light, he's sitting out kind of situation. I think it's, okay, maybe you're clear. Do you feel 100%? Do you feel like you are as athletic as, he's been doing change of direction stuff for a while now. Like I think he's got a pretty good amount of confidence in his knee, but because he does have the sort of the draft stock he built up from last year to fall back on, I think it makes it easier for him to maybe take a little longer runway to this if he wants to, and say, I'm not going to, maybe I'm going to take a few extra weeks just to make absolutely certain or whatever. So, unfortunately, we can't speak to Jermod McCoy and get his own thoughts on this. But yeah, I think I'll put it this way. I mean, behind the scenes, I think things have changed in over the span of the last month. I think there have been times where the thought was he was shooting for this Arkansas game to come back. And I think that even recently that was maybe a thought. But at the same time, I don't think I think he and people in his corner don't want him to force the issue and maybe come back too soon and risk all of that. So I think it's a multifaceted decision where it's about the health, it's about the confidence in the knee, and it's about the draft stock, and it's all together. And I think all those things kind of have to align for Jermod McCoy to be back out there. And that's where, it's kind of a decision to be made by trainers, to be made by Jermod McCoy, to be made by coaches, to be made by people and agents or whoever in Jermod McCoy's circle. So it's a complicated situation, and this probably won't be the last time we see this over the years, where in the coming years, where NIL and all this other stuff is in play, and draft stock and all this. it's unfortunate for Tennessee that it's played out this way, and unfortunate for Jermod to have to wrestle with something like this. But I think the competitor in him wants to be out there, but it's just it's not as cut and dry when you're coming off an injury that naturally does, in a lot of cases, lead to guys not being quite the same player when they're first back from an injury like that.
And Josh Heupel touched on this. I'll just read the end of the quote that he said on Monday at his press conference. Quote: "He's got more to go. I think it's all about him being prepared to go play. There's a lot of things that go into that. You look at the position he plays, all the reactionary work that you have to have. So you're always balancing his ability to be prepared and short-term, long-term health as well." So kind of touched on a lot of the things that we've touched on, just sort of the multifaceted, as you mentioned, and all the factors that are going into this. But Tennessee may be getting some more help on defense in the form of Daevin Hobbs. He's been out since about the middle of August with a foot injury. And it sounds like there's more optimism about him returning this week to make that defensive line pretty much full strength.
Yeah, and that's obviously we'll have to wait until Wednesday night to get the official word from Tennessee on the availability report mandated by the SEC. But there has been a good bit of optimism. At one point, there was some hope that Hobbs would be back in time for the Mississippi State game a couple weeks ago. That did not happen, and I think realistically the goal all along has been more toward this week and the Arkansas game. And just to be clear, I've not been told that he's for sure going to be back this week. I just think it's very much in play. So we'll see. It's going to be one of those things. This is a straight injury deal where he's coming off a fairly significant foot injury that they suffered during preseason camp, and I think he's just now kind of in that window where he could come back. So if everything lines up this week and he feels good to go, I think he's going to be back out there. And this is the guy that very opposite Jermod McCoy, I think has all the ability in the world, but he's got a chance to step into a bigger role this year. He needs to go out there and really start to prove himself. And I think there was a chance for a breakout season this year. There still is, 7 regular season games left, and Tennessee certainly needs him to play as many snaps as he can play. So that'd be a big deal for this defensive line. And I think it's, they've not, I wouldn't say they've struggled on the defensive line, but they've not been the same without Jackson Moy and Daevin Hobbs out there playing a bunch of snaps together. And that's not shocking. Any team that loses their number 2 and number 3 defensive tackle, or number 1 and 3, whatever you want to call those guys, you're going to feel that. And especially Tennessee having lost the depth it lost at defensive tackle from last season, that's led to freshmen and Nathan Robinson and obviously Dominic Bailey getting a lot of snaps at defensive tackle. And that group's just not been able to hold things to quite the same level that you probably would have with Hobbs and Moy out there playing a large portion of the snaps. So that would be a big deal. And if Tennessee can get him back, I think that could really make a difference. And even in the pass rush, I think interior pass rush has been kind of lacking. That's an area where Daevin Hobbs could really help. I think he gives you a little bit of that kind of dynamic ability you had with Omar Norman-Lott last year that you've really missed. Even Elijah Simmons at times, could be disruptive. You need another guy that can get after the quarterback and kind of blow things up from up the middle. Daevin Hobbs can give you that if he's the player he was, last year when he was healthy. And, I can't help but think of Rodney Garner talking, I think during preseason camp, Patrick, about how, he kind of reflected on what would Hobbs be like if he hadn't had, these surgeries and things he's had to deal with. And it has been unfortunate luck for him. He's dealt with something every single year. And, if he's able to play to his capabilities this season, despite all that he's battled, it is pretty impressive considering that he's not really had a normal, just clean offseason at any point, or at least not a clean full calendar year in his time at Tennessee. So he needs to get healthy, needs to get back out there. But it looks like at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. Even if it's not this week, it should be soon. And that would be big news for Tennessee if they can get him back this week.
Yeah, Jackson Moore said as much. He just on Monday said that they haven't really gotten a chance to show as a defensive line what they really fully have because they haven't been fully available. If you get Hobbs back and he's able to play a full workload, then everything sort of slots back into place how Tennessee would have envisioned it going into the season with the 3 guys at Leo. You can rotate 4 guys at defensive tackle at least, because I think they've Nathan Robinson's given them some solid play there as off the bench, and then you can slot Dominic Bailey back over to defensive end where you've got Tyree West and Tyree Weathersby. Now you're getting to the point now where it's okay, we've got to find snaps for all these guys. But yeah, Hobbs has had a couple of shoulder deals that have kept him from going through a couple of springs. And this is a player Rodney Gardner also is kind of compared to Richard Seymour in the past too. And Hobbs was a guy that you watched in preseason camp, and he was somebody, for me at least, that really stood out and passed the eye test. So They could get him back. That would obviously be huge. We did talk to Jackson Moy on Monday. He said he's good to go. He said there was some initial fear about his injury being potentially season ending, but once he found out it wasn't, it was kind of relief. He got back into the treatment room and worked his way back. And obviously he played, I think, a pretty full workload at Mississippi State. So he sounds like he's good to go. And another guy that's good to go, according to Josh Heupel, is David Sanders Jr. We'll see if he's in the starting lineup. I would be surprised. You might agree with me, Ryan. I would be surprised if David Sanders isn't starting at right tackle against Arkansas, but Josh Heupel did leave that open-ended. And again, we'll see the availability report on Wednesday night. We'll see about some other guys that didn't play against Mississippi State. You look at Ethan Davis at tight end. Dwan Morris missed that game as well. Marion Dye did not play as well. I think that's all of them that were sort of, I don't say late additions, but I think Dye and Dwan Morris I think they were added Thursday, the Mississippi State game. So we'll see about that on Wednesday night. And that will give us a little bit better glimpse on those guys, Jermod McCoy and Daevin Hobbs, as we have discussed here.
Yeah.
To the second part of our podcast here as we get to more of a big picture kind of outlook for Tennessee. The Vols are 4-1, Ryan, coming out of September. They've got 4 games coming up and 4 SEC games in a row here the next few weeks, starting with Arkansas. Then you go to Alabama. We found out Monday that will be a night game, Tuscaloosa, 7:30 ABC kickoff. Georgia Ole Miss was and that game's in Athens. It's going to be the 3:30 game. I think I didn't actually double check that, but those two were always going to be sort of the ABC doubleheader there for the 3:30 and 7:30 window. So that'll be a night game, Tennessee's first night game. I think it'll be the first of 3 in a row. Kentucky, that game in Lexington on the 25th also has been set for a night game back in June. We'll see what the exact time is here next week. And then Tennessee is hoping to get Oklahoma as a night game where it would wear its dark mode uniforms. I don't think the schedule on that November week is great. Florida, Georgia is that day, but it's always in its usual afternoon slot. So I know Tennessee would love for that game to be at night. But Tennessee's 4-1. I don't know their college football playoff chances, depending on the metric you look at, are 30 to 40%. What are we looking at as the outlook here, Ryan, after getting a chance to see Florida in action, to see Alabama, to see Vanderbilt? Obviously Oklahoma's got the situation with John Mateer. What does his injury look like? They played Kent State. It was a very glorified scrimmage because Kent State's terrible. How are we feeling? Are we feeling bullish on the Vols getting back to the college football playoff, or we think it's going to be a tough road for them ahead?
I was just telling someone this the other day. The overall outlook, and by the way, just to confirm, Ole Miss Georgia is the 3:30 game next week on ABC, and that helped Tennessee get that night game at Alabama, which probably is not a fortunate break for Tennessee, an even tougher environment probably on the road there at night against a good Alabama team, but maybe not an unbeatable Alabama team. I think that'll be a really good game, but with two good teams that have legitimate college football playoff aspirations. But yeah, tying into that, the overall big picture view of this team is about where I thought it would be after 5 games. They are 4-1. They do look like a team capable of winning 10 games if the stars kind of align in their favor, but it's not a team and schedule that you look down the remaining games and say, oh yeah, they're going to win all but one of these. It's not a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination. So I give them about a 50-50 chance of making it at this point. And I think it just depends on whether they get to 10 wins. I don't see much of a chance for them at 9-3. So can they, it basically comes down to, can they do something, because they have to do one of these. Can they do something they haven't done since 2003, win at Florida or at Alabama? And can they beat some really talented and troublesome teams in Oklahoma and Vanderbilt? We'll see if Oklahoma, as you mentioned, has John Mateer back by that point. We'll see if they're able to play well without him in the meantime. So I don't know that. I don't kind of think of them as a top 5 team right now. I think they're a good team, but I'm not sure they're like a national title contender, head and shoulders better than Tennessee or anything like that. So I think that's still a very winnable game for Tennessee at home, but it's a tough one, even if it is a night game. But that would definitely help Tennessee if it is a night game. And then Vanderbilt, they played Alabama really tough Saturday. I'm not sure Alabama's just a world beater like we've seen 5 years ago a lot of times, but they are still a very good team, and Vanderbilt stayed in that until the fourth quarter. So First loss of the season for Vanderbilt. I think all 4 of those games will be tough. I would be surprised if they lost any of the others, Arkansas, at Kentucky, New Mexico State. But you got 4 tough games left on the schedule, and basically you've got to go 3-1 in those and take care of business in all the others. It's a tall order, but it's one that can be done. And I think the key is this is a team that can score points. And when you can score points in this day and age, you've got a chance against anybody. And not only that, but I think Tennessee's defense has room to improve. And it's kind of what we were talking about a minute ago. They could get Daevin Hobbs back this week, potentially. They could get Jermod McCoy back at some point. And if those 2 things happen, especially, Tennessee's got a pretty talented defense that's capable of performing better than it has to this point. And maybe even without either of those guys returning, they could still get better down the stretch. So it's a team that has some upside, and they've got as consistent of an offense as anyone we've seen in the SEC so far. You look at Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Georgia, some of those other teams ranked higher in the league. Ole Miss would be the only other one that's probably in that discussion. Not many of them have an offense that's traveling as well as Tennessee's, no matter who they're playing or where they're playing. And that bodes well for the Vols. I think they can hang with anyone on their schedule the rest of the way. It's just going to depend on, the little things. Do they take care of the ball? Do they play good defense? Can they get pressure on the quarterback on 3rd down when they need to without having to blitz all the time? They're capable of winning every game on their schedule, though. It's just a matter of, can they go on the road and do something they haven't done in more than 20 years by beating either Alabama or Florida. And then if you can win one of those, take care of business in all the others.
Well, I mean, that's how Tennessee got to the playoff last season, is they lost to Arkansas. And then, they had to go recoup that one somewhere, and they beat Alabama. Then, they had beat Florida at home. So then they lost to Georgia. But they've got to sort of go make up for that Georgia loss, because, man, if you're sitting here, it's a totally different conversation. You feel like you've got some margin for error if you had pulled that game off. But at the same time, you're also 1 or 2 plays away from being 3-2, and again, the conversation is very different. The margins are so fine in this league, and you just look at just this past weekend. Texas goes out there and looks terrible again, but like, would anybody be shocked if Texas beat Oklahoma and its backup quarterback in the Red River rivalry? I mean, no. Is Georgia going to beat Auburn? That's a tough place to play at night at Jordan-Hare. So this league is, you said 9-3 won't get Tennessee in the playoff. I'm thinking, like, what if there's just total chaos in this league, and there's 4 9-3 teams, or maybe Texas A&M or somebody goes like 11-1, and then you have a host of 9-3 teams. There's just no way to know. And for me, Vanderbilt, Florida, we don't know what those games are so late in the season. We don't know if Billy Napier's going to make it to that point. Will that be good or bad if he's not the coach there at that time? I mean, Tennessee's about to play one team with an interim coach, and we saw with UCLA. I mean, who knows what the heck to expect? You have to kind of be, playing a team that may be bad but also has nothing to lose can be very dangerous. Is Florida going to be in that situation at the end of November? I think Tennessee benefited last season from playing Diego Pavia when he was beat to heck for 11 games. Is he going to be beat to heck again? Or is he going to be maybe the fresher version that tormented the league last season and got off to a pretty hot start before he kind of didn't play so great against Alabama and had a big dose of humble pie served to him after all the trash talk he was doing. So, I think they can beat Oklahoma at home. It's the Alabama game that's the question mark to me. I think Alabama is beatable, but Ty Simpson's playing really well. Those receivers look like they're a handful. And then can your offense travel? And so, but I do think, and as you were talking, Ryan, my question now to sort of segue is, like, have we seen Tennessee's best? Like, they really haven't put a complete game together when you think about it. Maybe Syracuse. I mean, they played pretty well early in that game. Syracuse, and again, that's the Syracuse is getting beat weekly now. It's not the one that Tennessee beat early in the season. So losing the starting quarterback hurt them pretty badly. But have we seen Tennessee play a complete game? I think offensively we've seen them play pretty well. The Georgia game was just about complete the way they went up and down the field there. Certainly was a complete game at Mississippi State. They had 2 turnovers that gifted Mississippi State 14 points in that game. Some drops. The offensive pass interference, which is a unfortunate break. But have we seen Tennessee put a whole game together yet? I think if you're looking at a glass half full, you're saying, hey, we maybe haven't played our best football. And like you talked about, they still might be getting some guys back that'll make them even better on defense.
Yeah, and that's not to overlook the addition of David Sanders, as you were saying earlier, potentially to the starting lineup, because I think that could make Tennessee's offensive line, which has played well to this point, even better. Whereas we didn't see them run the ball extremely well. I will say I think there are a couple of low key concerns about Tennessee. Well, I think the offense being pretty consistent so far is a good sign. They scored 40 against everyone they've played, I guess, right? They haven't scored less than 40 in any single game. While they've been consistent offensively, you've got the run defense that I think a lot of people are rightly concerned about, which again could get better with the return of Daevin Hobbs and with Jackson Moyd, getting back into a full workload. Those two guys will make a difference there, and I think they can get better at setting the edge and things like that could make a difference. There's some schematic things and just execution things that you can make a difference. I don't think they have enough. Tackling, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't think they have an ability issue on defense, and that's the good news. You can fix some of those mistakes. If you have an ability issue, there's only so much you can do. I don't think they have a talent problem and an ability problem in most positions. I think they may have some limitations in the back end, but in the front seven, I think they're capable of doing a lot of things that could clean up what they've had go wrong in some of those games early on. One of the low-key concerns might be, is this run game good enough? Because we've not seen them run the ball extremely well against either SEC team they've played so far. Georgia obviously has a history of slowing down Tennessee's run game. They've kind of had the dudes at the line of scrimmage to be able to hold up one-on-one in blocks and kind of cause some trouble for Tennessee even when they spread the field in past years. Tennessee ran it okay against Georgia, but not great. And then against Mississippi State, we saw their longest run of the game was 11 yards until the 25-yard touchdown in overtime by Deshaun Bishop. So, can they get better in the run game with David Sanders if he enters the starting lineup? That's something I would be interested in seeing in the coming weeks, because I think they might need to get a little bit better in the running game. Is it a little bit harder for them to run the ball with some of the changes they've made offensively? I think the changes they've made have improved the passing game, but when you're running more bunch sets and things like that, you're bringing defenders closer to the ball to start the play. Is that making life a little bit harder for Tennessee's run game instead of having these wide splits every single play like they've often had in the past? So there's some interesting kind of subplots here that I'll be fascinated, especially this next 4-game stretch, seeing if Tennessee answers some of those questions and kind of patches things up a little bit in some of these areas where they've not been perfect. But to your point, Patrick, I don't think we've seen Tennessee's best in that way. They've been a little bit turnover happy. We kind of wondered about that with Joey Aguilar. They've got a -1 turnover margin for the season so far. That's not bad. It won't get you beat all the time, but that's not good either. That's not usually what you see from a college football playoff team. So they forced some turnovers. They had 2 defensive scores against Mississippi State, but Joey Aguilar's had a couple interceptions in a couple of these games, and they do need to cut down the turnovers a little bit. And if they can get some of those things cleaned up, yeah, I think this team could take it to another level. They've certainly not played their best, and that's not to mention the drops, the muffed punts and things like that. That there's missed field goals, obviously, that cost them a game against Georgia. Just some things they could be doing at a higher level that could make this team potentially better than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think that's what's important about this game is you want to see a game where you don't do some of that stuff, right? Where your tackling is a little bit better, where you're able to run the football, where you don't have any special teams snafus. Because if you're still doing that stuff at this point of the season, it's not like a mistake. It's just kind of who you are, and that obviously can take a team that's got a lot of talent and got a lot of good players, which I think Tennessee has. Our last podcast we ranked the 10 best players, and we could have gone 15 or 16 guys that were warranted inclusion. So that they've got the players. It's can they all perform at the same level and consistently well. I wonder about the run game. Do we think it's do they need to get in 12 personnel more? I mean, is that maybe that's one way to get the run game going? They had some success with it against Mississippi State, but Jack Van Dorsel only played 7 snaps.
7 snaps.
Ethan Davis got hurt early against Georgia. And I think he only played 15 snaps in that game. You should be able to run against UAB, which they did anyway. But is that something that they need to get into more? And that's a big kind of philosophical question, because if you do that, you're taking one of your red hot receivers off the field, which I would be, do you want to do that? And then but if you need to run the football that way, can you? I do think Tennessee ran the ball pretty well on that last drive against Georgia to show that they can. It's a different conversation if they were running it and struggling overall, but it's easier to sort of say, hey, it's okay to run for 120 and 130 yards when you're throwing for 330 and 370. So, but they do need to get a little bit better balance there, I think. And I think they've, like you said, they just got to cut down on some of the mistakes. Like they've got to put a full game together and play more of a complete game for us to see what this team really could be. If they do that, then I think that's a pretty high level. But I think that's just the nature of college football, right? I mean, all these teams are all pretty good, but then, which Saturdays do you put your 3 or 4 best games out there, and which ones do you maybe not play your best and you maybe get away with one or you win like Tennessee did against Mississippi State. Defensively, I think my concern is probably in the back end. And it just feels, again, even a little bit like last year, where if their defensive line isn't wreaking havoc with sacks, pressures, if they're not impacting the game, it seems like the defense goes from really, really good to just kind of ordinary. Maybe that's a miscalculation, but I mean, I feel like there's been a lot of dialogue about this defense, but yet they lead the SEC, or they did lead the SEC going into last weekend in sacks. They're doing a lot of good things, turnovers, right? I mean, 20 sacks in 5 games is you're doing a lot of stuff. And I don't think they've been stat padding against the non-conference teams either. So, I think that group is still the strength, but if that group can be neutralized, even if it's for a half or so, then I think this defense kind of drops down a couple notches. Am I wrong there?
No, I don't think so. I think the secondary, basically, I think what you're saying outside of
I just
Colton
don't trust
Hood,
the secondary, right?
Yeah. Outside of Colton Hood, the secondary has been pretty ordinary. Now, you saw some good signs in a few of these games, especially the Mississippi State game. I thought Boo Carter played his best game in the secondary, and that's where the Jermod McCoy situation is interesting. Where if he's coming back soon, you probably aren't going to see any changes there. But if you had any sort of idea that McCoy might not be back for a few more weeks at least, you could. If you felt Ty Redmond is still getting picked on a lot because the ball is getting thrown his way more than other guys in the secondary, you could put Jalen McMurray back out at cornerback and Boo Carter at the star position, as some people have talked about. I just don't know that you want to do that and then immediately take Boo back out of the starting lineup. You've got him engaged now. You had trouble in the summer. You don't want to put him in the starting lineup, take him out, cause this whole other issue potentially, and get him upset about losing a starting job for no reason. So I that's an interesting dynamic. You got 2 guys playing pretty well at the star position now. If Boo can continue to build on that, show he's reliable in the punt return game as well, that's a big deal. But yeah, in the secondary, it's been hit and miss with Ty Redmond. He's been pretty good overall when you look at the numbers for a freshman, the PFF grades and things like that. Not bad. He's not getting just torched, but he's had his moments like the Georgia game where he has been picked on. And that's you expect that on some level for a freshman, but that's where they could get better. And then at safety, I feel like they've got to get better play out of really both of those guys. But I feel like we kind of know what Andre Turrentine is at this point. I'm not sure you're probably not going to expect a huge jump in him midseason, but I look at Idris Farouk as a young guy that needs to take things to another level the rest of the season. He struggled a bit, missed some tackles, taken some bad angles at times. Turrentine has too, for that matter. I think both those guys have had some missed opportunities to make plays that have led to longer gains and things like that. But at the safety position, the fact that you don't really have another guy to fall back on for significant snaps right now is your problem. Caleb Beasley's not really emerged as that third really trustworthy guy at that position to give you an alternative to maybe rotate 3 guys or whatever. So they need someone to emerge there, either Farouk taking things to a higher level or Beasley to give them another guy to rotate and keep Turrentine and everyone from having to play so many snaps. That could help them. But yeah, it does feel like they're a little bit more limited in the secondary, and especially to me at the safety position is where it stands out the most.
And they could find a 4th and 5th linebacker they feel good about too. Ben Bolton's been that 4th linebacker. We've seen it kind of go between Jaden Harmon early in the season to no one against Georgia to Jordan Burns off the milk carton against Mississippi State. So you talked about some of those DBs that are playing a lot of snaps. Same could be said for Arion Carter and even Jeremiah Thielander, Edmund Spillman they're splitting things there. But Carter's a guy that you don't want to. It's tough though, because do you want to take those guys off the field? Do you want to take a guy like him? Do you want to take a guy like Colton Hood off the field? probably not, but sometimes you might need to for their own benefit and also for your own benefit too. Not really an issue on the defensive line where they obviously are still rotating a lot, but yeah, certainly.
I still think one of the storylines for the remaining games is Tennessee's got to continue to bring this depth along, because you're going to have some injuries inevitably at one of these positions where we're not thinking they're in a position to afford one of these. Receiver, they've barely rotated there. What are the chances all three of those guys stay healthy the entire season and don't have a week at least where somebody's banged up and Travis Smith needs to play a bigger role? Or what are the odds that we've already seen Ethan Davis go down at tight end for at least a game? What are the odds that at safety, at cornerback, that you don't have another injury at some point, or on the defensive
line?
Yeah. So you've got to continue to bring those guys along at linebacker, knowing that Jaden Harmon has been there and in the mix. You need to keep bringing him along to get him ready, because at some point, someone somewhere is going to get hurt, and you're going to need one of these young guys to take on a bigger role. And Tennessee's ability to kind of fill in the gaps there is going to probably go a long way toward dictating whether they do make the kind of run we're talking about and being a college football playoff team.
Right. So, I mean, like, they could get David Sanders back this week and finally go back to the OG starting five that they were expecting going into the season, which inevitably means somebody will get rolled up on early in the Arkansas game, and they'll have to shuffle it all back around again. That's just kind of how football goes. But that's why we love college football. We love it because on a Saturday, UCLA can beat Penn State, and what other ones? Crazy stuff can happen. And so that makes it unpredictable. It also makes it probably a little harrowing for fans, because Tennessee fans might be looking at the Alabama game, and then you find yourself, in a 4-quarter battle with Arkansas on Saturday. You never know. That's an unpredictable team that's coming in with amidst of, even more of a mystery now, because who knows who's coaching them and what they're going to look like.
That's the great thing about this league right now, is it is more of an NFL-like product than it's ever been. I'm not sure there's a national championship team in the SEC this year. We'll see, maybe Ole Miss, maybe Alabama, maybe somebody, maybe Tennessee, maybe somebody can make a run at it. But right now, I don't think any of the SEC teams is playing as well as, Ohio State or Oregon or maybe even Miami, even though Miami's they've not been overpowering people, but they're getting it done. So I think it's a deep league. It's just not one that's got a powerhouse at the top. But in the meantime, if you're playing any of those teams in the top 10 or 12 in the league, you could lose on any given day, and the margin for error is slimmer than it's ever been. And I think what I was talking about is going to be kind of it's going to be the mandate for every team going forward. Your depth is going to be young guys, because as we saw with Larry Johnson and guys like that in the offseason, quality experience depth just isn't going to stay. Guys like that are going to go play somewhere they can start. And so your depth every year, almost everywhere in the country, is going to have to be young guys that haven't done it before. And each team's ability to kind of roll with the punches and be able to throw in a young guy and not fall off very much, that's probably going to determine who comes out on top in a very parity-filled SEC. It's a different era, and the challenges Tennessee has are kind of the challenges that a lot of teams have. They might not all have, 5 scholarship receivers they trust like Tennessee and things like that, but it's very similar, where you're not having the depth and the luxury of the just a large number of players you can count on that you had in the past. It's just hard for everyone to keep quality options, because in this era, people are looking at it like, hey, if I can go get paid at Vanderbilt or Virginia Tech and go be a starter, I'm going to do that instead of being a backup and waiting my turn at Tennessee, Georgia, or Alabama. And that's just how it is. And so everyone's got to adapt to it. And in the meantime, it makes everyone's depth just a little bit thinner than they'd like it to be.
Yeah, I look at the bottom half of the SEC 24/7 sports poll that we do every week, and you look at last week's poll. Kentucky is last, and they, were leading Ole Miss 10-0 at one point. Arkansas had Ole Miss on the ropes. Florida just beat Texas, and it was, I think, handily. Going to the swamp is not like going to UCLA or Rutgers or Minnesota. South Carolina is inevitably going to pick somebody off, because they always do, probably at home. Auburn's down there. They're they're only like a 4-point underdog to Georgia this week.
Yep.
And Mississippi State took Tennessee to the wire. So the bottom half of this league is rough, and you're going to just have to. It's going to be a just win, baby, kind of thing. Just by hook or by crook, just win.
And to that point, we're talking about how tough Mississippi State is, and I think people were probably disappointed by how Texas A&M kind of took care of business, at least in the second half, against Mississippi State. But that's a team that, almost upset Tennessee, and they may go like 5-7. I mean, that's just what this league is right now. It is a meat grinder, and you can be a pretty decent team and only win a conference game or two. So that's just how it is. And yeah, I may not even be giving enough respect to a team like Kentucky. I don't think they're capable of beating Tennessee, but that's still a road game, and winning anywhere on the road in the SEC is not an easy task these days. Even if it's a place where they don't have a tremendous home field advantage, it's just tough to win on the road.
It is. Tennessee is at home this week, though. They will take on Arkansas 4:15 on the SEC network as they get back to work after an open date. We will have plenty of coverage throughout the week. We appreciate you listening to this podcast wherever you get them. Wherever you do get them, please subscribe, leave a rating and a review. We're also posting these on our YouTube channel now. Go check those out. Check that out as well, and subscribe to that as well. We will have another podcast later in the week looking more to this game. Maybe we'll make it a mailbag. We'll see. But we will have plenty of coverage to get you ready for the lone Saturday at Neyland Stadium in a long stretch, Ryan. And you're going from November 1st when they get Oklahoma to, September the 20th against UAB. So This is the lone chance to get to Neyland Stadium. And as Josh Heupel said, he expects Tennessee fans to be rested and, quote, juicy for this game. So take that as you will, those of you listening out there. We appreciate you checking us out and giving us your time and your ears. Go check out the site for all of our coverage this week. And for Ryan Callahan, I'm Patrick Brown. We'll talk to you guys next time.